The creative minds in Hollywood and at the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences, host of the annual Oscar Awards, can tell you that Americans love action-packed dramas, and probably more than sports championship events like the Super Bowl and March Madness. Americans typically love the simple duality of good guys versus bad guys entertainment-packed films about cops and robbers, in which genre probably even more than spy dramas, like everyone's favorite Jan Fleming character, the calm, cool, and collected James Bond of MI6. Americans love a good caper heist film, and your typical heist film drama, like Ocean's 11, a favorite Rat Pack film that was reprised with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. It Takes a Thief, wonderful film, a wonderful film with Cary Grant and Princess Grace, or even The Italian Job, begins at an exotic location. And personally, if I was going to risk an encounter with swarms of law enforcement, armed professional security forces, and an aftermath of at least long battles in the courts through excessive appeals, maybe even to the nation's highest tribunals like the Supreme Court, I would at least want to be able to say at the end of the day that at least I got to put a new stamp on my passport before the whole plan collapsed in a moment like in the bank robber film Set It Off, with Frankie, the former bank teller, asking the arresting officer, "What's the procedure when you have a gun to your head?" But again, that's just me. And in a pandemic that has claimed over 6 million lives worldwide, including almost 1 million Americans leading the world, even Dr. Rochelle Walensky, a medical doctor, has said that human choice has not been our best friend. And this virus isn't stupid, promoting even the president's top medical advisor, Dr. Tony Fauci, to concede that this virus has fooled us before. And look at how many stamps it has on its passport, and it doesn't even have a brain or mouth to say thanks for the memories. Imagine that. But as America emerges from a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, finding its most picturesque moments in protesters for justice marching for Black lives that mattered, and raising statues that had stood unquestioned for centuries, and that found gay men and lesbian women celebrating in parties during a pandemic, amidst a controversial and still debated election that even has sparked its own year-long congressional inquiry that races for results between the midterm elections on an alleged insurrection that had occurred when bands of thousands had somehow incited by a speech at the Ellipse, conducted a forced march down to the Capitol, overwhelmed 3 professional security forces, breached a fortress atop a hill, negotiating their way through a labyrinthine maze of corridors and stairwells to set off what has been described as an insurrection. In the midst of cries of genocide and war crimes in the Ukraine, yet another distracting issue in the nation's capital has suddenly caught fire, as in on March 23rd, after a grand jury had been convened under the direction of the U.S. Attorney's Office in an investigation led by federal law enforcement authorities, including professional investigators like the G-men at the FBI, announcing the indictments of a total of 9 pro-life activists, all religious charges brought under 18 U.S.C. Section 241 for conspiracy to violate civil rights, like the killers of the Freedom Riders in Mississippi that spawned the film Mississippi Burning, as well as under the FACE Act, codified at 18 U.S.C. Section 248, a felony charge for persons who block the entrances to abortion facilities in violation of the purported rights of a woman to end her pregnancy and kill her baby. The question on many minds today, including the chief of police for the D.C. Police Department, that had somehow craftily sent 2 officers to foil the Watergate burglars, involves a midday raid in southeast D.C., an apartment building where film crews and a 2-time Emmy Award-winning journalist discovered items that may be described as babies from their appearance, and baby parts, or as fetuses, or even more clinically as biohazard material items, is how exactly these items arrived in the apartment. Apparently connected to an event that took place on October 22nd, 2020, and only discovered recently, and whether any particular laws, state or federal, were broken. And at least for now, even the D.C. Chief of Police is exercising extreme caution, stating that the matter is not his investigation, and that it is now a matter for federal authorities, conceding what attorneys describe as a federal preemption over the matter. His name is Bennett. He's not even in it, and has elected a right, perhaps dubious, at least for now, to remain silent. And on these facts, that is probably the reasonable course. Because generally, when we think of rich treasures for a caper mystery, it is not precious babies. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than the honey and the honeycomb, apparently in this case. And so in this unique and rather novel video series, prepared by an actual expert in physical security, law enforcement, and litigation, as a former trained tactical military intelligence analyst who actually worked in strategic counterintelligence, echelon above corps, we are going to be taking a look at some of the various aspects of this intriguing mystery from a legal perspective, with a view towards the charges that have been brought by the Department of Justice under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, or FACE Act, legislation enacted under President Bill Clinton in 1994, back when I was beginning in military intelligence, after the tragic killings of 2 doctors in the prior year had galvanized the Congress to address this issue, about which the United States Attorney General Merrick Garland, in the wake of the passage of anti-abortion laws in the great state of Texas last September, where we have recently intervened in an action involving Navy SEALs, fellow members of the Special Operations community, of which I was a part, had announced its determination to enforce the FACE Act against anti-abortion activists, and in defense of facilities that this professional security expert could testify in a federal court, enjoy the same protections and security assurances of banks insured by the FDIC, banks where I began my adult career, and facilities in which only a thief with the skills of a professional bank robber could remove, which does not describe your typical person attending worship regularly on the Sabbath. Doors that were closed during the pandemic, but also allegedly protected by the FACE Act, the subject of 2 litigations, one deferred back to the 4th Circuit on March 7th by the United States Supreme Court. In a very famous vignette related by America's most famous evangelist, Reverend Billy Graham, the famous bank robber Willie Sutton, who had famously said that he robbed banks because that was where the money was, had actually attended a crusade in Yankee Stadium, and had sincerely wanted to accept Jesus as his Lord and Savior, just as he was, without one plea, as indeed one sheriff in Alexandria tried to do during a pandemic, in places described by the governor as hotbeds of infection, and wanted to know if he could be a Christian bank robber, a question that apparently he had no moral compunction in avoiding asking Reverend Graham. But again, this is only personal. I look for a better question and defense to argue in final judgment before St. Peter at the pearly gate, who was once asked by a wayward sinner the great existential question as to why bad things happen to people. A question that had vexed the multi-billionaire Steve Jobs, even as an adopted child, apparently. And according to the account about old St. Peter, he had paused for only a second with a quizzical look on his face and replied, "I really can't answer that question because I really don't know. Because to be very honest, my friend, in my job, I never encountered any good people." This briefing is unclassified, as you heard. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for U.S. Congress. This year, resolved to do the right thing, and we shall make America great again. Honest. Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.